A warm but tense Caribbean breeze moves across the plaza outside the National Palace in Santo Domingo as the cameras capture the arrival of a high-profile visitor whose presence has stirred regional conversations. The arrival of U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth in the Dominican Republic comes at a moment when Washington's standoff with Venezuela has escalated into a bitter diplomatic confrontation, wrapping this otherwise ceremonial visit in layers of geopolitical complexity. As the convoy pulls up to the elegant white facade of the National Palace, President Luis Abinader steps forward, greeting Hegseth with firm handshakes and practiced diplomatic smiles. The images show the two leaders walking side by side, maintaining a calm exterior, even as both governments quietly confront one of the most contentious regional disputes of the year. The official description of the visit is simple: discussions on counter-narcotics cooperation, intelligence sharing, and joint maritime operations designed to curb drug trafficking routes moving through the Caribbean. But behind the polished protocol lies a broader story, one involving contested airspace, intercepted oil shipments, harsh rhetoric exchanged between Washington and Caracas, and a growing belief among diplomats across the region that the United States and Venezuela may soon cross a threshold that neither side can easily walk back from. Today's meeting is anchored in public diplomacy, yet it unfolds in the shadow of shifting regional power balances and an increasingly assertive Venezuelan military posture. Inside the palace, Dominican President Luis Abinader begins his remarks before an audience of ministers, military officers, and press. He speaks in measured tones, highlighting cooperation, stability, and the shared responsibility of Caribbean nations to protect their waters from criminal networks. His speech emphasizes the strategic importance of the Dominican Republic as both a logistical hub and a security partner for the United States. He notes that the country has invested heavily in new radar systems, port security upgrades, and coordinated patrols with U.S. agencies. The camera captures him mid-sentence, his expression serious yet diplomatic, reflecting the weight of hosting a senior American defense official amid such sensitive circumstances. When it is Hegseth's turn to speak, he steps to the podium with the same assertive presence he has displayed in recent months as he leads one of the most complicated defense portfolios in the Western Hemisphere. His remarks signal firm U.S. intentions, strengthening alliances, sustaining pressure on transnational criminal organizations, and reinforcing regional security cooperation, even as Washington faces criticism from Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua. His tone is resolute, echoing the broader U.S. narrative that drug trafficking and regional destabilization must be countered with coordinated action. In his framing, the Dominican Republic is not just a partner, it is a frontline state in an increasingly contested Caribbean. But the context surrounding this visit cannot be divorced from the simmering dispute between the United States and Venezuela. Just days earlier, the Venezuelan government accused the U.S. Navy of violating its maritime sovereignty after American surveillance aircraft and patrol vessels operated near disputed waters off Venezuela's coast. Caracas called the maneuvers a deliberate provocation, while Washington insisted that the operations were lawful, necessary, and part of a long-standing mission to track narcotics routes. The diplomatic messages exchanged were unusually sharp, and both nations have stepped up military readiness. This has created an atmosphere in which even routine diplomatic travel, such as today's meeting, becomes part of a much larger geopolitical narrative. The Dominican Republic finds itself in a delicate position. As one of the United States' closest partners in the Caribbean, the country relies heavily on U.S. economic ties, security assistance, and political support. At the same time, it shares cultural, commercial, and migratory links with its Latin American neighbors, including Venezuela. Dominican officials have expressed concern that rising tensions between Washington and Caracas could spill into broader regional instability, impacting trade routes, migration flows, and the security of Caribbean sea lanes. President Abinader's guarded tone during the palace remarks reflects this balancing act, as he acknowledges the need for cooperation while avoiding language that could inflame an already strained situation. As the cameras move from wide shots of the palace interior to tighter shots of each speaker, the visual rhythm reinforces the underlying dynamics of the moment. Abinader stands behind his podium, hands folded neatly, emphasizing partnership and stability. Hegseth follows with firm hand gestures and a pointed emphasis on joint action. While both leaders avoid direct reference to Venezuela by name, the subtext is unmistakable to observers. The Dominican Republic supports Washington, but it also understands the risks of escalation. Outside the palace walls, discussions among diplomats, analysts, and regional security experts paint a more complex picture. The Caribbean remains one of the most active narcotics corridors in the world, funneling cocaine and other illegal substances from South America to North American and European markets. For years, Venezuela has been at the center of Washington's accusations, accused of allowing trafficking networks to operate with impunity. In response, Caracas insists that U.S. allegations are politically motivated and designed to justify military encroachment. This tug-of-war has left smaller Caribbean nations caught in the middle, forced to navigate alliances while safeguarding their own national interests. Hegseth's arrival in Santo Domingo, therefore, is not just symbolic, it is strategic. It underscores the United States' intention to deepen its footprint in the region at a moment when several governments in Latin America have shifted left politically, forging closer ties with Beijing, Moscow, and regional blocs opposed to Washington's influence. The Dominican Republic, however, remains aligned with the United States, making it a natural host for talks centered on regional security. Within the palace, Dominican officials outline a series of joint initiatives: synchronized maritime patrols, expanded intelligence sharing, increased interdiction training, and deeper collaboration with U.S. Southern Command. These initiatives are designed not only to counter organized crime, but also to project stability across the Caribbean basin. In private conversations, however, U.S. officials admit they are concerned that Venezuela's growing military cooperation with Russia and Iran could complicate drug interdiction operations and further destabilize regional waters. Although these discussions remain behind closed doors, they form the unspoken backdrop of today's event. The visual sequence of Hegseth and Abinader walking through the palace corridors adds another layer to the narrative. It shows two leaders exchanging brief words, perhaps updates on the agenda, perhaps acknowledgements of the delicate moment they find themselves in. Their expressions are serious but cordial. These gestures convey the dual nature of diplomatic visits, part ceremony, part strategic calculation. As journalists analyze the remarks made inside the palace, they note subtle but important distinctions. Abinader speaks of partnership. Hegseth speaks of joint action. Abinader emphasizes cooperation. Hegseth references challenges. The Dominican president adopts the tone of a host seeking regional stability. The U.S. Defense Secretary adopts the tone of a commander confronting a regional threat. These nuances are not accidental. They reflect the different positions each leader must maintain in the public eye. Outside, Dominican security forces maintain a discreet presence, keeping the palace perimeter clear and ensuring the arrival and departure of the delegation proceed smoothly. The scene is calm, but the strategic environment around it is anything but. Over the past month, Venezuela has increased its air patrols, intercepted foreign aircraft it claims were entering its airspace, and publicly accused the United States of orchestrating destabilization efforts. Washington, for its part, has expanded its training missions with Caribbean and Central American allies, sending a message that it is prepared to counter any regional threats. For Dominican citizens watching the images broadcast on local television, the visit is both a point of national pride and a reminder of the country's strategic location. Many recall the long history of U.S.-Dominican cooperation, from disaster relief missions to trade agreements. Yet some also express concern that being such a close U.S. ally could inadvertently draw the nation into geopolitical conflicts. Analysts argue that the Dominican government must walk a careful line, strengthening ties with Washington while maintaining constructive relations with Latin American neighbors who may view U.S. involvement with suspicion. As Hegseth continues his remarks, he emphasizes that the United States sees the Dominican Republic as a critical partner in stopping narcotics flows before they reach U.S. shores. He outlines plans for expanded maritime surveillance, upgraded equipment for Dominican security forces, and new joint training programs designed to counter sophisticated trafficking networks. His tone is authoritative, reflecting the United States' broader strategic interest in securing the Caribbean as an extension of its national security perimeter. The Dominican president responds with a message of gratitude for U.S. support, highlighting the successes of recent operations that resulted in major drug seizures and the disruption of organized crime groups operating in the region. He notes that such victories are the direct result of international cooperation and that continued collaboration will be essential in the months ahead. His words reveal the Dominican Republic's reliance on U.S. resources, intelligence, and diplomatic backing, an alliance that has grown increasingly important as criminal networks adapt to global security shifts. Behind the scenes, aides from both countries prepare briefing documents, outline points of agreement, and quietly negotiate the language of a joint statement, expected to be released later in the day. This careful diplomatic choreography ensures that both nations project unity without inflaming regional tensions. While the statement will focus on combating drug trafficking and enhancing regional security, it will likely omit direct references to Venezuela, a calculated omission designed to maintain diplomatic balance. As the meeting progresses, the symbolism of the images becomes just as important as the content of the speeches. The wide shots of both leaders standing before national flags signal alignment and solidarity. The mid-shots of Abinader speaking emphasize his role as a regional statesman seeking stability. The close shots of Hegseth underscore the seriousness with which the United States views the current security environment. Through these visuals, audiences around the world interpret not only the spoken words but also the unspoken messages of strength, partnership, and preparedness. Experts watching the visit note that Washington's approach combines classic diplomacy with strategic reassurance. By reinforcing alliances in the Caribbean, the United States aims to counter what it sees as growing security challenges posed by Venezuela's alliances with Russia and Iran. Meanwhile, the Dominican Republic benefits from increased security cooperation, greater political visibility, and the implicit protection that comes from being a key U.S. ally in the region. As the event in the National Palace draws to a close, the leaders share final words, pose for photographs, and prepare for closed-door discussions likely to involve more sensitive topics than those mentioned publicly. The power dynamics remain clear. Washington brings significant military and economic weight to the table, while the Dominican Republic provides strategic geography and regional credibility. The challenge for both sides is ensuring that this partnership strengthens regional stability without escalating tensions. When Hegseth concludes his remarks, he steps away from the podium with the composed confidence of a senior American official accustomed to navigating politically charged environments. Abinader, likewise, maintains his diplomatic composure, underscoring the Dominican Republic's role as a responsible regional actor. The images of Hegseth speaking, capturing his tone, posture, and controlled urgency, reinforce the seriousness with which Washington views the moment. By the time the delegation exits the palace, the significance of the visit is already being analyzed across the region. For Washington, it is a demonstration that its alliances remain intact and that its regional posture is firm despite growing challenges. For the Dominican Republic, it is an affirmation of the strength of its partnership with the United States and a reminder of the delicate balance it must maintain in a volatile geopolitical environment. For Venezuela, it is a signal that Washington's regional footprint is expanding, even as Caracas seeks to push back against American influence. As the motorcade pulls away, the final images of the day capture the intersection of diplomacy, strategy, and regional tension. The visit may appear ceremonial on the surface, but its implications extend far beyond the palace walls. In a region where alliances shape the movement of ships, the actions of militaries, and the responses of governments, Today's meeting is one chapter in a much larger story, one that will continue to unfold as Washington and Caracas navigate their confrontation and as nations like the Dominican Republic work to safeguard their stability in an increasingly unpredictable geopolitical landscape.
Este miércoles 26 de noviembre del año 2000.
En nuestro país al secretario de Guerra Pete Hegseth. Su visita reafirma nuestro compromiso de seguir fortaleciendo las relaciones con los Estados Unidos de América, la lucha contra el narcotráfico. Esa lucha es esencial. Hemos acordado con los Estados Unidos ampliar temporalmente la cooperación para reforzar la vigilancia aérea y marítima contra el narcotráfico.
President Abinader, Mr. President, thank you for greeting us today. Thank you for affirming our strong partnership and cooperation. We had a Dominican people for their tremendous hospitality. My wife and I realized we were here about 6 years ago visiting your beautiful location.